Marcus, so I was on a trip to the Middle East recently, which is a strange place because you've got every engineering culture clashing there. The Brits, the Yanks, everyone's there, the locals, the Europeans. So specs tend to be like this melting pot of everything. And I was speaking to a client about Division 25, integrated automation, and no one really knows about that spec section outside of the US. I mean, how well known is it in the US?
Well, I mean, it's been around, I think we're going on like almost 30 years. And the thing about it, there are a lot of sections of it. I mean, there are, I believe there's over, oh God, almost I don't know, I'd probably say maybe 40 or 50 different sections. I mean, from operation and maintenance. I mean, you could have the commissioning, you could have basically software, terminal devices, control sequences. I mean, anything electrical, you name it, any system basically can have the type of integrations. Like, for instance, I mean, I presented on this a few times where it's like, whenever someone says to me, well, what is Division 25? And I'm like, well, the purpose of this division is, I always say, to connect automation with multiple engineering disciplines, trades. We're trying to basically generate a coordinated sort of like a single product delivery, like in one place, because everybody knows that when you have a front end on a control system, you're going to have all these. You can have HVAC, lighting, generator, access, this, that, alarms. I mean, it's just like you're having all these pieces, and everybody's been trying to pull them together for so long, and so it goes into the same thing as the digital twin, right? So you have a digital representation of a building, and then basically, so that all that is just a building with all these different pieces and all these different sensors, and they're supposed to be on one page. So it's just like it's kind of like Neo. I mean, the Matrix. It's like ones and zeros. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like the intent, like literally Division 25, it's an integration of all these systems, meaning where all these different technologies come together, or at the same time they should come together. I mean, the benefits of this entire division is obviously the operational integrity, real-time monitoring, maintenance. It's localized. I mean, you have data, usable data, resiliency. You have tons of stuff, and so obviously cybersecurity is a humongous component of this, and it can roll on the same exact area. But then it's the same exact side, people will say, oh yeah, well, if it's so great, how come it hasn't been brought into play? And I'm like, so how old's the internet? Oh, 20 years, 30 years, right? I mean, when did people actually start? I mean, how many people actually have an iPhone, but at the same time, nobody knows how to code it, but maybe 1% of the world. So it's just the same thing where it's just like controls. Oh, it's voodoo. It's voodoo. It's not. I mean, there's so much data inside of a building. And remember, data is gold. Data mining, data platforms, building systems, BIS systems. My God, it goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And that's why ChatGPT, right? Where it's just like, it is a search engine. I wish people would understand that. It is one of the best. And the thing about Division 25 is once you truly start to understand and you actually start to peel the layers, the typologies about the interconnections of all these different areas, right? The one thing that you really can identify is you can start to identify scope gaps, right? And so gaps, I mean, that is the major way to basically mitigate risk. And you have all these different divisions, you have all these different things, and then people are like, well, I can't get this to work and this to work. I'm like, gap analysis, SWOT analysis, KPI, right? At the end of the day, I know I'm going on and on a tangent, but at the end of the day, when people say, well, I want my system to do this, this, and this, and I want to basically be able to have a competitive bid, and I don't want to basically have a proprietary system for controlled system ABC. Okay, well, ABC can basically run on different platforms. You can basically have a Niagara platform. It could be a Metasys. It could be basically a Siemens. It could be a Honeywell. But remember, they all have their own network. A network is nothing more than basically just a highway, right? And you basically you have little pit stops on the way, but it's on the same highway. But when you go to a different network, they're different, but you can bridge them, right? Or at the same time, like when you get to Division 25, you can say, I want all my equipment, doesn't matter which vendor, it's going to basically have to perform the same way. So we're really trying to basically get away from proprietary. We're trying to get basically to more backnet secured. We're basically trying to get to a less kink, a less gap. We're getting there.
It's interesting, right? Because owners kid themselves. I don't want to be proprietary, but once you lock in with a vendor, you're locked in, right?
You are locked in,
yeah.
And listen, I mean, honestly, like I don't see any better benefit from one to the next. Let's just
they're all the same deep down, right? But what we're talking about here is interoperability. So does Division 25 become the gateway to a smart building? We're talking about
100%.
Yeah.
Everything basically you just said. So, we've reached a stage in the industry right now where smart buildings, right? Digital twins. I mean, that is becoming the goal, right? Or it has always been the goal for some of us that have been in this for 10 plus years, where it's like we have the sensors, we have like the people counters, we have this, we have that. Remember, a motor is still a motor, it pushes air and water. Lights still come on and off, but you have all these different controls, and now you have all these different IP things. You have all these different areas, and all you're trying to do is basically control this, control that. Eventually, right, if we ever get there, which I think we will, is the skin of the building will basically be reactive to the outside, to the inside, to the temperatures, to the pressures, and then those will be reactive with the mechanical systems, right? Yeah. So you'll actually have a breathing, system inside of a building, like it'll be an ecosystem. And the ultimate goal would be to never waste any more energy than you have to, and also transfer the energy over to another building or another heat source if it needs to. And then basically, if there was ever to be a complete smart grid, like you remember the whole, like you charge your car at home or something like that, you drive it in, basically plug it in the building, you charge it, you drive it home, or you basically give the charge back to the building and you give it back over here. Like it becomes an ecosystem. If we are getting there, and I mean, I don't know what the world's going to be looking like in 20 or 30 years, but I think it's going to be very complex.
Very complex.
But for those,
embrace
this right now, you will have job security. You will understand basically how the matrix works from behind the scenes.
Yeah.
For the rest of us that do not jump on this curve and understand smart buildings, digital controls, coding, you're going to be in the dark.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's really going to divide people in terms of who owns what, right? But what we're talking about here, you touched on a really good point there. You get these very clever, complex control systems, they say, for HVAC, for lighting, for envelope shading, but they're not interoperating and communicating with each other and coordinating, right? Like your HVAC system's working off certain set points. Your facade shading system is working off certain sensors, right? But there's no coordinated, if this is doing that, then I don't need to do this.
Well, see, the thing about it is like, so that's the whole point of actually trying to integrate everything.
Yeah.
But the more that we're actually trying to integrate it, the more it gets a little confusing. So you're going to hear people always talk about, oh, well, it's got an API, and everyone's like, what? You're like, that is nothing more than an application programming interface. Okay. Yeah. So, and I'm going to read this for everybody. API stands for Application Programming Interface. The world of application refers to any software with a distinct function. It basically is thought of like it's the interface between two different applications, right? Yeah. How these two areas communicate with each other for requests and responses, right? It's nothing more than basically a computer program that can work with another computer program, right? So then the next thing people will talk about is like, oh, well, you got to have an SQL. Okay. A structured query language, right? So once again, coding, areas of programming, standardized programming language that is used to manage relational databases, perform various operations. Like once you start saying these words, it's just like any other acronym, they'll make sense. And I hope more people watch this and realize that any student, you don't have to be a 4-year engineering architect. You don't have to be a tech in a heartbeat, right? And people don't realize how much text no college, right? Basically can make, I mean, 50, 80, 100 plus $1,000 a year, easy, right?
Yep.
You just have to learn the language.
That's my theory, that the people like you and I, 20, 30 years from now, the versions of us, will have the applications engineering knowledge plus that coding and data management knowledge, right?
You're so like, but remember, like the future generation, what worries me is basically like, you know, I used to work on engines like 350 Chevys, right? So I actually knew the thought behind it. And then now it's like everybody wants to work on electrical engines. Well, I just happen to love, you know, electricity, electromagnetivity. I mean, I honestly, if I could go back to school right now, it would be for materials engineering and then basically electrical engineering, electromagnetivity. I mean, it's just the future, right? It's just like everything when it comes to turbines, when it comes to anything with rotary, anything electrical, amazing. But at the same time, it's just like, you know, it's probably gonna be like, oh, you know, with VR and stuff like that. You still got to go touch it. You still got to be part of it. You still got to, like, you know, see it, feel it, and know what it means.
You've got to have the knowledge, right? You've got to have, it's not good enough just to be a software jockey. You've got to have the application engineering knowledge and the experience.
Like I said, if I ever, you know, soon in the future, if I ever had the opportunity, and if I had a kid or something like that or whatever, I'd be like, you want to take electric motor apart? Let's rebuild it. You want to take other motor apart? Let's rebuild it. I mean, I'm that guy where it's just like, I mean, when I come to class, I'll bring samples, I'll bring this, I'll bring that. I mean, hey, if anybody's watching this from a manufacturer, send us like a cut up piece of a scroll or a chiller or a centrifugal. I love it when they have, you know, go to those conferences.
I love them cut out images.
They're cut out.
Diagram.
Oh my God. I would give anything to have those, to basically show those in class, because once you can see basically a sectional or blow up, people go, what? And you're like, that's it. You're like, oh my God. And then you got to think, wow, how genius was it someone created that. But there's some of us that are visual. There's some of us, you know, and then there's the touch. So everybody's got to find what works for them. But Division 25 is not going away. It is only getting more popular, and it is the future of interoperability and controls, and it makes smart buildings and digital twins possible.